Okay, we would like to turn to Exodus chapter 3. We were here last week in Exodus 3. I want to look at it again. Exodus 3, we'll read the first 15 verses. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the midst of the bush, and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Draw not hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people, which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land unto a good land, and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come unto me, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppressed them. Come now therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said unto God, Who am I, that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, Certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall serve God upon this mountain. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers hath sent me unto you, and they say to me, What is his name? What shall I say unto them? And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. And God said moreover unto Moses, This shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, hath sent me unto you. And this is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations. Again, this is the account of Moses being called of God to lead the Israelites from Egyptian bondage. We read in Acts 7, verse 22, that Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and deeds. But in and of himself, he was not equipped to do the work of God. Even though he was well learned, and even though he did mighty things, he was not equipped to do the work of God. Man cannot mold a vessel fit for the master's use. Man cannot do that. It is God that would make Moses a vessel fit for his use. Now in the account, the Lord appears to Moses from a burning bush, calling him to his service, It is a miraculous and amazing event that would have a life-altering impact upon Moses, leaving a God impression upon Moses. And so our text is really an account of the glory of God put on display in such a way that it would alter the life of Moses. So what we read here would become the foundation of Moses' service to the Lord. It's something that we desperately need in our lives, what we read here. Our subject is our need of burning bush experiences. And we need to join Moses at the burning bush. We'll begin with the setting of this event from Stephen's account in Acts chapter 7. We know that Moses spent the first 40 years of his life in the palace of Pharaoh. Notice Acts 7 verse 23. And when he was full 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren, the children of Israel. God used those 40 years as a part of the training of Moses for God's service. Moses had a heavy burden for his people, for the Jews. And they were enslaved in Egypt. And one day, he took matters into his own hands and slew an Egyptian. As a result, he would flee into Midian. And we read there in Acts 7 verse 29, Then fled Moses at this saying, and was a stranger in the land of Midian, where he begat 2 sons. So he's now a stranger. He's gone from the palace to being a stranger in the land. And again from Acts 7, we know that he spent 40 years in Midian. And God used those 40 years also as a part of the training for his service. And then notice verse 30 of Acts 7. And when 40 years were expired, there appeared to him in the wilderness of Mount Sinai an angel of the Lord in a flame of fire in a bush. So that brings us to our text. And Moses is now 80 years old. And the account opens in verse 1 of Exodus 3 with Moses tending the sheep. And it says that he was on the backside of the desert, or the distant wilderness. We read of the mountain of God, which we referred to last week, has reference, of course, to Mount Sinai. There is also Horeb, which refers to the mountain range where Sinai was located. So there's Moses in the shadows of Sinai, doing the mundane, doing his routine, that which was seemingly insignificant, just an ordinary day. But then we come to verse 2. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him. Those words, the angel of the Lord, occur 59 times in the Word of God. Prior to our text in Genesis 16, we see that the angel of the Lord appeared unto Hagar in the wilderness. We read there in Genesis 16:7, the angel of the Lord found her. And in verses 9, 10, and 11, we read 3 times, and the angel of the Lord said unto her. And in Genesis 22, the angel of the Lord appears to Abraham And in verse 11 of Genesis 22, He called unto Abraham out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And in verse 15, we read, the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time. And that brings us again to our text, and the angel of the Lord appeared unto him, unto Moses. Same angel of the Lord that appeared unto Hagar, same angel of the Lord that appeared unto Abraham. Now I believe that these are pre-incarnate appearances of Christ. In verse 2 of our text, we are told of how this appearance to Moses took place. Notice, in a flame of fire. And then notice, out of the midst of a bush. So we're told two things there. There's a flame of fire, and it's out of the midst of a bush. And we are told that though the bush burned with fire, the bush was not consumed. So this was a God interruption in the life of Moses. God interrupts the life of Moses to display Himself in a way that would stop Moses in his tracks. God interrupts to display Himself in a way that would bring Moses from the ordinary and the routine. It would change his ordinary and change his routine. He appears to Moses in a way that would make him aware of who he is. God interrupts the life of Moses to display Himself, to give Moses a greater reliance upon God, a greater dependence upon God. It would cause him to seek God more. It would cause him to come to God more and cause him to cleave to God more and caused him to rest more. So God interrupts the life of Moses that ordinary day to give him more assurance and more conviction and more certainty concerning who God is. We have a tendency to get caught up in the mundane and the routine, to get so caught up in these things that we live life mechanically and we lose sight of the fact of God. We live within what we'll call the horizon of expectation. It's that part of life that we can reasonably plan and count upon. And it's what we expect. We all live there. We all live there. Every one of us, we plan our day. We expect things to happen. We expect tomorrow to get up and all these things. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It becomes wrong when we lose sight of God. And we don't want our expectation to be shattered. We don't like that. But that's what happened here. There's Moses living in the horizon of expectation, just living his ordinary life, and God interrupts his life. He shatters the routine. What Moses saw and heard that day was vivid. It was very real. And I don't believe he ever got away from it. I believe it was with him the rest of his life. It would be something that would control his life and would motivate him and sustain him. He spoke of it again at the end of his life in Deuteronomy 33:16. He said, "Him that dwelt in the bush." He never got away from it. Him that dwelt in the bush. Now in those words, Where's the emphasis? The emphasis is not the bush. The emphasis is Him. Him that dwelt in the bush. He never got away from what happened that day. The purpose of the entire event, I believe, is to get Moses focused upon who God is. Moses, you need to know who I am. If you're going to serve me, you've got to know who I am. And again, what happened that day was life-altering. Oh, how we need these God interruptions in our life. We need to ask ourselves, do we want God to interrupt our expectations, our routine? So let's look now at the event of the burning bush. In this event, God got the full attention of Moses. In verse 2, there's a bush on fire. Now, many commentators, and they may be right, I don't know, have said that this was really not uncommon in that day, in that region. Due to the dryness and extreme heat, bushes would catch on fire. So let's assume that's so. So there's a blazing fire. The fire is in the bush, but the bush was not consumed. Now that does not ordinarily happen. And the bush was not consumed. So the bush is inflamed, it's burning, it's blazing, yet the bush was not consumed. This is supernatural. The fire was not doing what fire normally does. Fire consumes. But this fire was not doing what fire normally does. The bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. So Moses sees something taking place outside of the norm. In verse 3, the fact that the bush is not consumed is what has the attention of Moses. Notice, read verse 3. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. So it wasn't that the bush was on fire. That didn't seem to be unusual. But what got his attention was this bush was not consumed. So God has the attention of Moses. And in verse 4, with the attention of Moses upon that bush, we read, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush. So you have a bush that's on fire, yet it's not being consumed. And then out of the midst of the bush is a voice. The voice of God. God has the full, undivided attention of Moses. Moses tending the flocks in Midian. I don't know how much he was thinking upon God that day, but I know this. God didn't have his full attention. And so it is with us every day unless God intervenes. Oh, God, we have God on our mind to some degree. But how many days does God have our full, undivided attention? That's what happens here. So God gets the full, undivided attention of Moses. Why? To call him. To call him. Oh, the need for God to so intervene that He has our full attention. That He has our full attention. In verse 4, God called him out of the midst of the bush, this bush that's on fire, and said, Moses, Moses. He is saying, Moses, I know you. You are the one that was drawn out of the Nile River by Pharaoh's daughter. The one who was trained in the palace of Egypt. The one who after 40 years took matters into his own hands and murdered an Egyptian. The one who was rejected of being delivered by your own people. The one who escaped to Midian. Moses, Moses. Moses is standing before God, realizing that he is fully, God knows everything about him. He is fully known by God. It is God saying, Moses, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you. Oh, how we need God to have our full attention where we realize God's talking to me. God would often do this. It was Abraham, Abraham. Samuel, Samuel. Simon, Simon. Martha, Martha. Saul, Saul. We need to get to the place where we know that God is talking to us. No one else is there. It's just us and God. We need to be brought to the place where God has our undivided attention so that we hear the voice of Him addressing us personally. It is God talking to us in our circumstance. That's what happened in our salvation experience. It was God in us. What we read here is the captivating presence of God. A God intervention where you hear God calling your name, whatever place you're in, whatever situation that you're in. Moses responds, here am I. A God intervention that causes us to be ready and willing to hear what God has to say. We need those burning bush experiences. In this event, everyday life is consumed. It's overflowed. Verse 5, Moses obviously is drawing closer to the bush. And God says, draw not hither. Moses, stop right where you are. Don't come any closer. So in this God intervention, it was one that caused Moses to be irresistibly drawn. So he's moving toward the bush. But God intervenes again. And it was demanded of Moses to separate from everyday life. The feeling compelled, Moses feeling compelled to draw close, the Lord says, stop. Put off thy shoes from off thy feet. The reason? For this is holy, sacred, and set apart ground. What was transpiring was not ordinary and must not be viewed as ordinary. And Moses was to put off the shoes of everyday walk in life. What God was going to say would overcome, would overflow everyday walk in life. Everyday walk in life would have to take a back seat. That's not what matters now. It's all to be put to the background. So God so intervenes that there was no room for levity, no room for lightheartedness. And oh, how we need a God intervention that would cause us to rise above the ordinary. And that everything ordinary is just put to the side for the time being. A God intervention that would move us entirely to a different level. That's what's happening here. A God intervention where life, where the ordinary would never be the same again. That's what we need. In this event, God was on display to Moses. Verse 6, hear the voice of the Lord. I am. I am. A God intervention where God proclaims, I am. Present tense. I am the God of thy father. Moses, I am your father's God. The one who put his faith in me and trusted me with your life. I am that God. I am the God of Abraham. The God of election and blessing. I am the God of Isaac. The one who miraculously spares life. I am the God of Jacob. The God of amazing, unprecedented, incomprehensible love. The God who possesses patience and compassion. The God of transforming power. The God who can. Moses, that's me. The God who can overhaul lives and provide hope where there is no hope. This is a God intervention where God stood revealed to Moses. It is God and Moses. And the Lord is saying to Moses, I made promises to your forefathers, and I was with them to bless them, and I am here for you. It's me. It's a God intervention where God stood revealed as the faithful one. The one that Moses could depend upon. Verse 7, verse 9. He stands revealed to Moses as the tender, compassionate, loving one who knows and who identifies himself with his people. He says in verse 7, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and I've heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. It should be compared to what we read in Exodus 2, verse 23. And it came to pass in process of time that the king of Egypt died. And the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage, and they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage. For 400 years, the Israelites had toiled under the gruesome task of Pharaoh. But this had not gone unnoticed by God. Never does. Never does. He is the God who knows. He is the God who sees. And that is something that must get hold of us. And then in verse 8, He stands revealed as deliverer. He says, I am come down. The God of your father. The God of Abraham. The God of Isaac. The God of Jacob. I have come down to deliver them. God is holy. God is separate from all else. But that being said, God is not distant. He's come down. It is, I am come down to deliver them, notice, out of, to bring them up out of, notice, that. To bring them up out of that. But that's not all. You notice also the word unto. Out of that unto a good land, and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey. From that land unto I am come down, to bring them out of misery and hopelessness, to a land overflowing with blessing. I am come down to bring them out of cruel bondage to heaven on earth. It is God connected to human needs. That needs to get hold of us. God connected to my needs. It is God coming down for His own. Also in this event, God reveals His purpose for Moses. Back in verse 8, we hear God say, I am come down to deliver them out of the land of the Egyptians, out of that land. I am come down to deliver them. But then in verse 10, it is, I will send thee that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. God's purpose is to deliver His people from bondage. But He would use Moses to accomplish such. Based on verse 8 and verse 10, Moses might ask, God, who's doing this? You or me? You said in verse 8 that you're doing it, and yet in verse 10 that I'm going to do it. Who's doing it? And God would say, yes, that's true. I'm going to do it, you're going to do it. I'm going to do it, but I'm going to use you to do it. I'm going to do it, but I'm going to use you to do it. Or I'm going to do it through you. What a blessing. What a blessing. Moses, his purpose in life has been revealed. God could do it all by Himself, but He would use Moses. God could have sent a fleet of angels, but He's going to do it through Moses. So Moses now realizes he has a God purpose. He has a God purpose. And oh, how we need these interventions of God to remind us that we have a God purpose in life. You might be in the backside of the desert, but you have a God purpose in life. And we are here to do His bidding. And we need these experiences to remind us, I have a responsibility to God in this life. In this event, Moses is assured. In verse 11, after 40 years of herding sheep, Moses says, why me, God? Why me? And in verse 12, there's God's response. Certainly I, there's the emphasis, will be with thee. Thee's not the emphasis, I is the emphasis. I have sent thee. Moses is assured of God's presence. I will be with you. A God intervention that will cause us to think less about who we are and more about who God is. Well, why would God use me to do such and such? You don't have to know that. All you have to know is God. God. A God interruption that tells us that God's identity is more important than our identity. You know how many people hem and haw because, well, I just don't feel like I'm the one that should. Get your mind off yourself and get your mind on God. It's not about our identity. It's about His. And in this event, Moses is told what he needs to always remember is the fact that God is God. In verse 13, two important words, when and what. Moses asks, when? What shall I? Lord, when this happens, then what do I do? Oh, we're good at that. Well, Lord, what happens when this happens, then what? When this happens, and on we go. It is, when such and such happens, what shall I? And then we come to verse 14, and God said unto Moses, I am that I am. I am that I am. He's saying, what I was, I am, or I am what I was, and I am what I shall be, or I shall be what I was and am. I was, I am, always shall be. I am who I am. That's the simplified version. I am who I am. That is always so concerning God. Not only am I am, but I am that I am. I am that I am. God is saying, you ask me to identify myself. And the only way I can define myself is by me. It's the only way you can define God. It's the only way. I am that I am. He's expressing a vital truth. God is incomparable. God equals God. So you have God, you have equal signs. What are you going to put on the other side? God equals, what are you going to put on the other side? There's only one thing you can put on the other side. God. God equals God. God defines Himself. God simply is. I am that I am. That's a very profound and deep statement. I am that I am. You say, well, how profound is it? Well, it's as profound as God. How deep is it? Well, it's as deep as God. I am that I am. It's unsearchable. It's incomprehensible. It's a statement as great as God. I am that I am. I exist because I exist. I am that I am. He is what His people need. He's everything they need. You look back on your life, and God is what you needed. You look at the present, and God is what you need. So in the future, what do you think you'll need? God. God is always what we need. Moses must get hold of this. An awesome responsibility to deliver the children of Israel from Egyptian bondage. And God is saying, I'm God. And I'm what you need. You don't need anything else. You don't need anything else. Oh, the need for a God intervention that vividly shows us who God is. If you were to ask me what is the child of God's greatest need? You think about that. What is the child of God's greatest need? Oh, you could hear a lot of answers. But I believe the child of God's greatest need is to know who God is. To just simply know who He is. because most don't. It changes everything to know who He is. Isn't that what God is telling Moses? I am that I am. God wanted Moses to know who He was. He is basically telling Moses, Moses, you ask when and what. When you face the problem of Pharaoh, you need to simply know and remember who I am. That's what you need. Moses, when in your service of me, in doing my will, you're going to need to know someone who is self-sufficient, who has everything you need. And Moses, that's me. You need to know that, Moses. He's saying to Moses, I'm your strength. I'm your deliverer. I'm your sustainer. I'm your victory. It doesn't matter what Pharaoh does. It doesn't matter what the people do. Moses, I am everything you need. That needs to get a hold of us. It'll change our life. I am that I am. I don't need help to be who I am. I am who I am. We're not here to help God. God doesn't need help. He is I am that I am. You have only one. He's telling Moses, you have only one source, and it's me. Oh, that we believe that today. I have only one source, and it's Him. That's always true. Always true. We need a God intervention that reminds us of these things. You see, many want God's provision, but they don't want God. They're all for God's providing them, but they want to keep God at bay. We need God. We need more of God. And we need God interventions that remind us, I need Him. I need Him. And then notice in closing, verse 15. He tells them again, I am the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. All these people are dead. And He says in the present tense, I am the God of these. They're all living. They've gone on. He's still their God. He's still their God. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial. Moses, what you've seen today, what you've heard today, don't forget it. You need to carry it with you all your life. And we need burning bush experiences that cause us to carry it with us all the remaining days of our life. This is how we serve God consistently. This is how we live for God consistently, by knowing who He is. Whatever it is that we have to face in the service of God, we must do so knowing and remembering who God is. Who God is. Don't get caught up in the whens and the whats. Just know who God is. That'll change our lives. And God will greatly use that life. Brother Ben, if you'll come and lead us